Hello, and welcome to Eastern Roman History. I'm joined by Mr. Powee Celdran, who has created and is publishing a Byzantine-themed board game called Battle for Byzantium, and he has come to tell us a bit about it today.
Hello, thanks for letting me guest on your channel, Eastern Roman History. So I am now happy to present my board game, Battle for Byzantium. It's been a very tiring process to work on this game. It took me a long time, almost like a couple of years to do this. We have the map of the Byzantine Empire in the year 1025 AD, the year the great Emperor Basil II died. So the empire here stretches north to south from the Crimea to Syria and west to east from Italy to Armenia. And it features 18 cities of the Byzantine Empire, which were important during the time this game is set in. The Byzantine Empire was at its height as a cultural and military superpower of the Middle Ages. This map was designed by artist Alessia from Sicily. And I don't know if any of you know who she is, but she's an artist who has designed a number of books, most of them being fantasy and mythology books. This was actually something new for her to design a map of a Byzantine setting game. These cards are, by the way, they're illustrated by Krisa, who's the illustrator of the Byzantine Tales comics. She also illustrated the event cards and the characters.
Oh, I do like her work.
Yeah, that's why I chose her work, because she makes excellent Byzantine themed artwork. So there was no other artist to choose but her. All right, so you have any questions for me?
An initial question would be, what inspired you to make a board game about the Byzantine Empire? Or maybe that could be two questions. So why a board game and why the Byzantine Empire?
Main reason to this is because, number one, a board game is a new product that will feature the Byzantine Empire. There aren't really any board games that are set in the Byzantine Empire. There are some board games that have an ancient Roman setting or an ancient Greek setting or a medieval European setting, but there is like hardly any, or if none, that are set in the Byzantine Empire, which is why I chose to have a game set in the Byzantine Empire. And why Byzantium? Well, I've had a long passion for Byzantine history. It's been 4 years since I've been into Byzantine history. And I wanted to always make something big out of my passion for Byzantine history. So if not doing a book, or if not doing other products that have to do with Byzantine history, I chose to do a board game. And why not a board game? Because it's a fun way to get people together and to introduce them to Byzantine history. This board game is really made for people who don't really know anything about Byzantine history. It's to introduce them to it, which is why I chose the setting also of the year 1025, because this is like the perfect time to have a game set in the Byzantine Empire, while the empire was at its height during the Middle Ages.
There's also a great tipping point between the peak of their power and then their sudden collapse. So what type of board game is this?
It's a conquest board game. So if you notice in the map, there are like a number of cities here. These towers here are supposed to be cities. The objective is to capture them. The game ends when all of these cities are captured. So as you see, there are like starting points. Each character, the game has 4 characters. Each of them has their own starting point. So up north here, we have a character that starts here. We have someone in the south. That's the east. And we have in the west. So here are the 4 characters of the game. We have the Byzantine commander here, Demetrios, a Varangian. This is a very unique addition to the game. It's a female Varangian warrior, Freydis. We have a Norman knight, Jean-Pierre, and an Arab, Al-Sadin. So each of the characters start at their own starting points. And the character starting point has to reflect the area where they came from. So if we have the Norman, he starts in the west. If we have the Byzantine, he starts in the east. If you have the Varangian, he starts at the north, and the Arab, he starts at the south. Yeah, the whole point of this is that when you land on the red squares, you see these red squares in the map. When you land on them, you're supposed to pick out a card. So it tells you what to do. Each card has its own illustration. So for example, like this one here, it says Greek fire. When you get this card which says Greek fire, you're supposed to go back to where you started.
You mentioned you win by conquering the map.
All of the cities in the map have to be conquered.
How do you know you've conquered a city? Because if you only have one character, I assume
If you move your character, for example, the dice over here makes you land on one of these red tiles. You're supposed to pick out a card. Then, for example, you get the card which says gain an army. That means whenever the dice makes you land in a city like this, you're going to capture that city. Another way is if you land on the red tiles and then you pick out a card that says besiege a city. If you pick out that card that says besiege a city, then that means you immediately conquer the city that is like closest to you. So
but what happens when you run into an enemy city?
if you run into an enemy city or like a city that someone already owns, then nothing. You're just passing by. But you can lose a city.
How do you do that?
So there are like a number of ways you can do that. There's a function in the game called gain a navy. If a player lands there, you can capture any city you want, whether owned or unowned.
So what type of cards are there apart from the movement and besieging ones, as you already mentioned?
There are 7 kinds of event cards. We have Greek Fire, we have the Plague, we have Besiege a City, we have Gain an Army, Gain Gold, we have Rebellion. If you pick this out, then it also means you lose a city because the people in the city rebel against you. We have another card also in the game. This card here is called Sack a City. So when you pick out this card, that means you can capture any city you want, whether owned or unowned. So that's a way of losing a city also when the enemy player picks out this card.
No, it seems good.
Yeah, there's a rule also about these cards. So every time each card is used, they have to be surrendered. It's only one-time use. I think that's it about the cards. But each character, I forgot to tell you that each character has their own special ability.
So what are their special abilities?
You play, for example, you play as Jean-Pierre the Norman. He's immune to the plague at least once in the game. So if he gets the plague card, he doesn't have to go be exiled in Ragusa. And if you're playing as Freitas, when you get the Gain an Army card, this Gain an Army card here, she can use it twice instead of once, at least only once in the game. The 2 characters, the other 2 heroes, we have Al-Sadin, the Arab. His special power is that he's immune to the Rebellion card at least once in the game. So that means he picks out the Rebellion card. Then that means he doesn't lose a city if he gets that card. And lastly, we have Byzantine Commander Demetrius. His special power is he's immune to the Greek Fire card at least once in the game. So if he gets Greek Fire, then that means he is immune to that. He doesn't have to go back to his starting point.
So it's optimal at 4 players.
I've tried it with 4 players before. It's really fun if you play it as 4 players because 3 players is okay, but if you play it as
how have you found it with playtesting the game?
Really, really fun, really interesting, really entertaining.
Have you seen lots of different strategies come up? And
yeah, actually, I've seen a number of strategies or reactions also of people who've been playing the game. Like some people are like, sometimes they get to be screaming because they lose a city, they start screaming, they get the plague. Or when someone lands in the Gain a Navy, it's really, shocking when that happens.
What do you use the dice for, and how important is that in the game? Because I know some people, when they play board games, dice can make all the difference.
It really does in this game. It's all about the dice and the Gain Gold card. The Gain Gold makes you move 4 steps forward. So if you have the roll of the dice, then 4 steps forward, it can get you somewhere.
And how long does this game typically take to play?
There are 2 versions of the game. You can play the short version or the long version. The long version is about 2 hours. The short version of the game is like 45 minutes or an hour, something like that. The long versus the short version. The long version is you play the game till all cities are conquered. The short version is when all of these event cards run out, and then the one with the most number of cities wins the game. The long version is when these cards run out, you have to reshuffle the event cards, and then you continue playing the game.
Which type of game have you preferred? Have you preferred the longer ones or the shorter ones?
For me personally, I think I like the longer version better since it's more entertaining. The short version is like you still want to continue playing it when you're done with the game. It feels short, so.
Is there anything I haven't covered yet?
Once a player captures a city, they're given these cards here. The card is like these are called ownership cards. So each city has their own card with a drawing of them. So we have Constantinople here as the imperial capital. It's the only card that's colored.
Are there special rules for taking Constantinople?
Actually, yeah, there are special rules. Like you remember the Gain an Army card. If you capture Constantinople, you need two of that to capture Constantinople, not one. Since that's a reference to the walls of Constantinople being impossible to attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a reference to that. So that's why you need two gain an army cards instead of one to capture Constantinople.
And what's the reward for taking the capital?
Well, if you take Constantinople, the reward is you're immune to the rebellion card. So that means you don't lose any other cities. But you can lose Constantinople if someone takes it with a sack a city card, or capture any city you want with a gain in navy. So that means that even Constantinople is part of that. So yeah, that's basically it about owning Constantinople. The reward really is you're immune to the rebellion.
That sounds good. And I can imagine lots of people fighting over control of the
Yes,
city
actually,
for
when
that.
we
Yeah.
played the game, it was like that. Like everyone really wants Constantinople. So whenever someone goes to the gain in navy, the first city they choose to capture is Constantinople. No other city but Constantinople.
Yeah. Have you tried having other cities with a certain significance, or did you find just having Constantinople as the focal
Well,
point?
yeah, it was only just Constantinople then. Every city here in the game is just they just have equal status, but only Constantinople is the city that has something special about it. But every city has their own illustrated card with a drawing of the city. So there are 18 cities in the map, 18 illustrations, 18 city cards. Yeah, a lot of these cities in the map have their own interesting stories. So behind every card, there's a description of what the city is.
Some flavor text.
Yeah, there's trivia about each city here.
You mentioned at the beginning how you spent 2 years coming up with.
Actually, it's been longer than 2 years. I first designed the concept of this game 4 years ago. So yeah, 4 years ago, I had a class in college about designing games. It's called Game Concepts. So back then, I just got into the Byzantine Empire and its history. I designed a board game about. Well, it was just a prototype of the game. It wasn't very fixed yet. I designed Battle for Byzantium, although it didn't have that name yet. It was just a generic game. I just hand drew it myself, and that was 4 years ago. So yeah, I just did that for a class. But then when that class was done, it was forgotten until like 2 years ago. I brought back the idea of doing the game. So from then on, I was working on conceptualizing the game, improving it, fixing everything from before.
So, did you have any other inspirations from board games you've played for
Well,
this game?
actually, this game wasn't so much inspired by board games, but I was a fan of the Rome Total War series before. So this game is like I just thought of it as doing Rome Total War, but a board game.
Yeah. I hope it does well, and I hope you are pleased with your good efforts. It looks really good.
Yeah, I'm actually very pleased that it turned out to be great. Like the final product was more or less perfect.
Well, thank you very much for coming on and talking about it.
Yeah, thank you also for guesting me on your channel, Daniel.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you. So, is there
Yeah, I've
place
been
to keep an
posting
eye out?
on my channel, No Budget Films. I will be posting videos about the board game on the channel, as well as a trailer and the instructions on how to play the game. And I can also update you all on the game through my social media sites. I have a Facebook page, Byzantine Time Traveler by Powee Celdran, and my Instagram account, Byzantine Time Traveler.
And that will be in the description. I think we'll wrap up here. Thank you very
Yes.
much, Powee, for
Thank you very
coming
much,
on and
Daniel.
telling us about Battle of Byzantium. And this has been Eastern Roman History.